Hi, this is Tara with Love Prevails. I've got my friend Keith here to talk to us a little bit about his journey into sobriety and why he got into sobriety and why he stays. Keith has quite a lot of sobriety, so I'm really excited that he came to talk to us today. With Love Prevails, we do offer intervention support services and peer support services for those that are not only struggling with addiction, but also for their families that are watching their loved one struggle with addiction. We are definitely here to help. Keith, I want to thank you for being a part of this today. Are you ready for the holiday? Are you ready for Christmas?
I wore the tie, didn't I? I mean,
yeah.
Yeah. Yes,
I wore the shirt. I'm on the nice list.
There you go. I'm ready for the holidays. It's going to be a little different than what I'm used to, but yeah, I'm ready. I think I'll have Christmas Day all to myself. So because my kids are, committed in different places. So.
Is that what makes it different? Is your kids are committed differently?
Yeah, to different households and all that. So I'll have them Christmas Eve Day. I'll be fine. But then I'm free Christmas Day.
Mm-hmm.
I will sleep in.
Sounds like an amazing day. My plans this year are I'm going to stay in my pajamas all day long.
Okay.
And I am going to binge watch TV with my girls. I've got both of my girls here this year. In the last few years have been less than desirable holidays, just with different paths that my girls have taken and that I've taken. And this year we're all on a sober path, so it's going to be very different.
That's awesome.
No martinis this year all day long, and I'm not doing the big prime rib dinner that I've done in the past, and I'm just going to take it easy and just enjoy really good family time with me and my girls. So
excellent.
That actually sounds like an amazing day. So Keith, tell us a little bit about your journey. I know you have a lot of years. Why did you get to the point where you decided to be sober, and why do you stay?
Well, I got sober courtesy of my first ex-wife. Yes, girls, I'm what they call a keeper. She went into a program, and I was dragged along as what they call as an outpatient. I didn't quite understand why I needed to be an outpatient. But the staff there said, "Don't worry, we know what we're doing, just stick around." Okay. And then they laid all these rules on me that in order to be a part of this program, I had to abstain from alcohol, from compulsive overeating, I had to attend 12-step meetings, I had to read and study and do all these things, and I did not get that at all. I said, wait a minute, you have her for 90 days, why don't you just, or 60 days, why don't you just fix her and send her home to me? And they said, trust us, we know what we're doing. Okay. And I said I would do exactly what they told me to, which I didn't. I had my fingers crossed below the table. And about halfway through the program, and I would attend as an outpatient and do family therapy and peer therapy, and we would have education hours twice a week. I began to find something out that I needed to be right where I was. And when I say we had that hour of education twice a week, they brought speakers from all the 12-step groups. I mean, there were alcoholics, there were compulsive overeaters, there were gamblers, there were heroin addicts, there were compulsive shoppers, there were sexual abuse survivors. They were just and I would listen to their stories, and I may not have identified with the substance or the behavior that they were using at that time. But when they talked about those feelings of being less than, being not good enough, about suffering for no good reason, boom, I was connected. And then they talked about how good they felt that now that they were in recovery. And I said, I want what they have, I just don't know what it is, what qualifies me for that yet.
Right.
Now, I stopped drinking. And very soon, I was presented with the question, have you decided what you're going to do about your drinking once you leave here? And I said, I haven't. I have not decided yet. And then they reminded me of what's printed in the big book, and that was the controlled drinking experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Go to a bar or go to an event and have one drink and walk away. Go and have 1.5 and walk away. Set a limit, meet it, don't exceed it.
Mm-hmm.
And as I drove home 90 miles from the program where she was that night, I said, you know, I have failed that test every time without the benefit of this program. The last 4 or 5 times that I got drunk, it was only supposed to be 1 drink, or 2 at the most.
Right.
And I woke up the next morning always, how did I get here? Where's my money? You know, check the car for damage. Who did I insult? Who did I betray? You know, what I had to have the details of my life filled in for me. I got home and I started tossing and turning, trying to go to sleep. And I just kept going for the next 2.5 hours. Am I or am I not? Am I or am I not an alcoholic? Am I or am I not? And finally I just looked up at the ceiling, because I guess that's where my higher power lives. And I said, I'm an alcoholic, what's the big deal? And I fell asleep. It was the best night's sleep I'd had in a long time. I started attending not as a peer or as an Al-Anon. I actually admitted to being an alcoholic, and things changed from that moment on.
Mm-hmm.
I found out I could live without alcohol. I found out that I found out that there was more to just not drinking. There was actually working a program and being a part of a community that I never felt connected to.
Right.
Throughout my drinking days, oh yeah, I had plenty of people that I drank with, but I couldn't really count on them for much of anything. There's a couple, but overall, no.
Right.
I am sure that when I stopped drinking, that my seat at that bar was hosting another person pretty soon. When I left that circle of guys drinking in a parking lot, I know someone took my place there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And 40 years later, I've been able to not drink.
You're 40 years sober?
Yes.
That seems, for somebody that coming in and that hasn't even had a 1 day, 40 years seems unachievable. 30 days seems unachievable.
Yeah, and I went through that experience. As I walked in as a newcomer and someone would take a 60-day chip, I'd say that's impossible.
Right.
Nobody could do that. But then I looked at the in my case, the men around the table, and they talked about long-term sobriety. And back then, long-term sobriety was 1 year, 2 years, 3. And I go, man, how does anybody do that? And they had one simple message: stick around, keep coming back, stick with us. And pretty soon, 1 day became 2, and 2 became 20, and 20 became 20 weeks. And 20 weeks became 20 months, and then the next thing I know, it's 20 years.
Yeah.
And then I doubled that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I could tell you that I've enjoyed every sober moment. Can't do it. I can point to about 2 or 3 days in the last 40 years that I didn't want to be sober, but I didn't want to drink either.
Right.
I said, this is just something I have to get through. And I went to meetings, I talked to people in recovery, maybe even saw a therapist, but I got through it. And then, I was able to offer that lesson to somebody else later on when they needed it.
Yeah. You mentioned something really important, and you said that you went to your groups in the beginning because something was wrong with your ex-wife and you wanted her fixed. And that is something huge that I think a lot of people can identify with. Before I started on my journey, I did not see anything was wrong with me. I could see friends that they were alcoholic, and then I was, on this mission to help my youngest daughter who was heading down a dark path, and she needed help. I didn't need help. But I had somebody ask me long before I started this journey if I thought I was an alcoholic. And I could always hold my alcohol pretty well. You know, I could drink a bunch, but I held it well. And until later, of course. And I would always tell them, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm walking a fine line. I know there's alcoholism in my family, but I haven't crossed the line yet. And so I wasn't. And then I was challenged by a medical professional because I didn't know. I didn't have a clue. And so I would never hit it. Mm-hmm. And so this medical professional told me to write down how much I drank, and I did. Because I didn't have a clue. But I drink a bunch. And he looked at me and he goes, do you think you're an alcoholic? And I said, no, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm walking a fine line, but I haven't crossed it. And then he handed me the clinical version of what an alcoholic is, and I was reading it, and I was like, and I was many times higher than what the clinical alcoholic was. And the clinical alcoholic, it's not very much alcohol. and so that's when I was geared in this direction very, very reluctantly. And then it, you know, when I finally gave myself over to, you know what, I am an alcoholic. When I started getting involved and all that, I didn't feel like I related to anybody. So that was another thing you mentioned. I didn't relate to anybody. And then it wasn't until I was able to get a year sober, I did have a relapse. That's when I came back and I realized I relate to everybody. And that's for me when things drastically changed. And so I think that those are really important things for people that are not quite there yet, because we're more in tune to what everybody else is doing. Mm-hmm. And go ahead.
Yeah. My another story that I tell quite often, as far as the assessment as to whether I was an alcoholic or not, let me tell you that when I first got my clue, my fiance at the time was in nursing school. She had to do a health fair as part of her, requirements. She and a girlfriend were doing presentations on child abuse or something like that. And the booth next door to them was a couple of guys from Alcoholics Anonymous. And they were handing out copies of the 20-question quiz, along with all their other literature. And that's the Johns Hopkins 20-question quiz. It's not really used as a diagnostic tool any longer, but it was a series of 20 questions. So I grabbed a pencil and I just sat there and I started checking things, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Then I looked at the fine print at the bottom, and it says that if you have one yes answer, you may have a problem with alcohol. 2 says that you're showing definite signs of alcoholism, and 3 or more yes answers, you're an alcoholic, according to the Johns Hopkins Medical School. I had 4 yes answers, and I knew exactly at that moment what I needed to do. And that was to take that pencil, flip it around, and use the eraser to get rid of 2 yes answers, so that I could just maintain the shadow of a doubt. And I told myself as I erased, 2 of the answers, I go, well, I don't do that anymore. And that only happened once, so it really doesn't count. Mm-hmm. Now in recovery, I take that 20-question quiz every so often. Now, as I continued drinking for another couple of years after that experience, some more things went wrong, but also I could now see the questions in a different way and realize that I was really obscuring the questions so that I could give it a no answer. Today, when I take that quiz, I have 18 or 19 yes answers, depending on how I feel about one of them. But you also mentioned, Tara, I was quick to point out alcoholism in other people. Mm-hmm. If you put me in a room with 100 people, I would say that everybody lined up on this side had an alcohol problem because their wife argues with them about it, or they've been suspended from their job, or they've lost a cherished job, or they've been in a crash, or they've been arrested X number of times for DUI. And over here is a line of people that they don't drink like I do, so therefore they're boring, they're glum, they're super religious, they're uptight, they're whatever. When I finally made the decision that I was an alcoholic, I didn't look at those folks anymore. That's their own journey. And I began to look at some of the examples of how these people lived in this direction and decided, I think those folks are onto something. They know that alcohol is being destructive in their lives, or they avoid it altogether, or they're living happy, joyous, and free without chemical. I, thinking that I'm a normal drinker and the standard by which others should be judged, that didn't work any longer. I knew I was an alcoholic, and I needed to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, and this also brings up another question I've got for you, because I never felt like I hit it, because I never felt like I was an alcoholic. And then as I've gone through my journey, just different things come up for me. And I was actually talking with my oldest daughter yesterday, and I know maybe it was somebody else, and we were talking about, I rarely went. I'd go to the bar from time to time to dance, but when I did, I'd only drink beer because I didn't get drunk on beer. And then, it was always good to Uber and stuff, but I never stayed anywhere very long. 2 hours was my max, and then I'd go home and finish what I started. And I think it was my oldest daughter, but I never realized I was hiding. To me, that was just me doing me. And that's where I was happy. And to this day, I don't stay very many places very long, but and she looked at me, she just didn't want people to see that. And I said, that wasn't my intent. I just had my fill and wanted to go be by myself. But if I look back on it, I drank a certain way in public because I didn't want to get drunk. And then I'd go home and drink differently. And so I can look back and sometimes with the help of somebody pointing it out, realize I was hiding it. But I didn't realize that. I've got a curious question for you. I've had 2 people ask me in the last few days that I've talked with addiction about, and they've asked me what can the government do to help people, and I think that's really an interesting question, and I'm wondering if you have an answer. And I'll tell you my answer is, the government can't do anything. They could possibly come in and revamp some of these rehabs to make them better. I've heard Medicaid no longer provides rehab. They can maybe, there's not much, there's really nothing the government can do to keep people sober. If there's not a desire, then there is no sobriety.
Correct.
And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, there's a reason I'm not in higher government. I do work for the government, but I'm not at a higher level because I don't. That's way above my pay grade. I will say that in my opinion, that the present model doesn't work, and some of the proposals about safe injection sites, or in San Francisco, for an example, they actually have. I heard about this where they have a group of about 20 alcoholics that they supply their daily allotment of alcohol and allow and control their drinking so that they will get to a point and pass out or fall asleep, and therefore they're not moving around and falling down and hurting themselves. And you're still, at any point does the government say, and here's a program, we'll drive you there, we'll take care of your kids, we'll do whatever, we'll watch your dog while you're there. At what point do we allow people to remain on a road of self-destruction? I don't, or do we offer them and assist them into help? I just don't know. It's tough. It is a tough. It's you know, when somebody figures that out, they'll solve a lot more problems than that. But you're asking the wrong guy.
Yeah. Every time something is removed, something new pops up. And I think back to Prohibition. You know, when they had Prohibition, people found a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. You're going to find what you're looking for, whatever that may be.
Correct. I mean, this argument can be made for everything that people want to ban or have banned. I mean, there's plenty of drugs out there. There's plenty of Cuban cigars. There's plenty of illegal firearms. You can find them. You can get them anywhere and find them.
And there's plenty of sobriety.
And there is also plenty of sobriety and a way to avoid all those things.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? Why do you stay?
I stay for a couple of reasons. First off, I like to watch people walk into meetings and see them progress and know that they are happier than when they first walked in. Mm-hmm. My disease of alcoholism was one of isolation. You talked briefly about isolation earlier, and that's, I think that for every drink that I ever took with another human being present, I took 2 or 3 by myself. I used to say, when people talked about my drinking, I can take it or leave it alone. And the truth of the matter is, I wanted to take it and I wanted to be left alone.
Yes.
I don't want you bothering me about my alcohol. I don't want to share my alcohol. And finally, when I get to a certain point, I'm going to have a pity party and you're not invited. I'm going to cry about my dead dad. I'm going to cry about my dead dog. And I'm going to cry about that endless list of women who broke my heart. And you're not entitled to be a part of that. Okay?
Yeah. Or you can come as long as all you do is listen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And pamper me.
Yeah. And just, it's okay. You know, pat me on the back and tell me it's going to be okay.
But don't try to fix it.
But my disease, as I said, is one of isolation. We've been dancing around this, but I've been a cop for 48 years now, almost. Started off with 30 in Los Angeles, and you know, almost 15 or so, 16, 17 here in the state of Colorado in smaller agencies and smaller in different roles. There's a situation that happens in big cities like Los Angeles, and I'm sure it happens out here too. It just didn't happen to me enough. But I would get a call to go to a hotel or an apartment building, and you meet the manager, and they say, hey, number 14 is Mr. Smith, and nobody's seen him for a week, and you know, it's beginning to smell in there, and you can hear the TV going, but nothing. All right, give us the key. So we would take the key, and we'd go and find, and there's Smith, dead on the couch, surrounded by bottles and cans. And the TV's on, and the record player's going. It's a historical note. It's this machine that used to play these black discs on kids. But it would be, you know, just scratching at the end. And I would look at those, and in the early days, I would say, how does somebody get like this? And then as a training officer who was still drinking, my trainees would say, how does somebody get like this? And I had no answer for them. And then I'm finding myself in the same situation. Home alone. That was the greatest days off altogether. My wife would take our son out to the desert to visit her sister, and I'm planning my drunks now. Toward the end of my disease, I am planning my drunks. Close all the curtains, turn on the air conditioning, shut the windows, let the machine pick up the phone, watch TV, watch videos, but the saddest, most miserable music that I could find, and bottles and cans all around.
Yeah.
I was just like those people I had seen. So later, when my trainees would say, how does somebody get like this? I tell them, I'll tell you exactly how they get like that. And I shared a little bit of my story with them, and you know, every time I tell my story, a little more guilt and shame is taken off my back. And I tell people that recovery is possible. And I've made some great contacts out there in the world. I know the questions to ask somebody that I've arrested. You know, I'll say like, hey, what's the longest you ever stayed sober? And they'll say, well, I had about 18 months one time. And then I said, you stopped going to meetings, you stopped calling your sponsor, you stopped working a program. How do you know that? And then I share my story with them. And I got to tell you, there's been some beautiful moments of recovery out there, and one that actually followed up with me and said that I had saved his life. Mm-hmm. The neat thing about going into a lot of meetings is hearing people talk about how those cops didn't arrest me, they saved my life. And I would encourage all of you in law enforcement, if you're watching this, that you know, if you just do it politely, kindly, you know, let them see the results of their efforts. They work hard sometimes to get into jail and into hospitals. They work very hard to do that. I don't need to be a jerk about that. I can be kind and understanding and just say, hey man, when you get the opportunity, check out a meeting. Your life might change for the better, and be rid of the interference of guys like me.
Yeah. You guys get a bad rep for that.
That's okay. Comes with the territory.
Well, Keith, I really appreciate you sharing all that with us. I did want to know, because you mentioned that you save, you know, people tell you save lives. Have you ever been in a meeting where you saw somebody's whose life, you actually saw how you changed their lives?
I've been privileged to be in 3 different meetings or 3 different settings with recovery. 4, but I didn't remember this one. I was out at the West LA VA hospital, or no, the San Fernando Valley VA hospital, and I was doing a presentation with a veteran. And afterwards, some guy came up and said, he says, you arrested me one night for robbery. And I looked at him and I go like, well, it must have been more memorable for you than me. I honestly don't remember you. But he was sure. And we didn't exchange names or anything like that, so I didn't look it up afterwards. But I have seen people that I've arrested, and there's been a couple of hugs along the line. But one of my favorite stories is driving down Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood one night, about 2 or 3 in the morning, and this car pulls up alongside and honks, and I got my window down because that's how I roll. And this guy rolls his window down and says, hey, I need to talk to you. So we pulled over on Sunset Boulevard, and this guy jumps out of the car and starts heading over toward us. I mean, I'm still struggling to get out and get myself, you know, situated. And he reaches into his pocket, and I go, oh no, here we go. So I go to the holster, and he comes out of his jacket pocket and opens his fingers up, so I know it's not a gun. And he throws a crack pipe down on the hood of my car. And he says, I can't take it anymore. You need to arrest me and put me in jail. So his name was Nick. And I said, Nick, you found the right guy. And we had to use a section that is very rarely used in California called 23152C, as in Charles. And it's called addict driving. 23152A or B is the DUI statutes, but C was for somebody who may not be actively high or drunk at the who may not be actively impaired at the moment, but if you can substantiate their addiction, that's not right for them to be driving. So I'd never used this. In the 30 years I was in Los Angeles, I only used it that one time. But I interviewed Nick as I would any other person who wanted to get sober, and he talked about the unmanageability of his life, how he can't keep $2 in his pocket without doing something stupid, the daily grind that he was going through in order to maintain his habit. And he signed the sheet. He was only too glad to. And he thanked me for putting him in jail. A couple of weeks later, I got a subpoena. I was on call for court. I never had to appear in court. And then I get a note back saying that he accepted a treatment program, which I guess they don't do anymore these days in California, or they're about to go back to it. But he entered a treatment program. About 6 or 7 months later, actually it was more like a year later, I was at a recovery talk by Father Martin. And if you get a chance, check out Father Joe Martin. Has a lot of great YouTube videos and all that. But I'm standing in line to get myself a soda, and there's a tap on my shoulder, and it's Nick.
Wow.
And I turn around, and he says, "Hey, I just wanted to thank you. I saw you in line." He says, "I just wanted to thank you. You helped save my life. I've been sober a year now. I've been off crack cocaine." And we embraced, and it was really a good feeling for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome, and that's why I decided to start Love Prevails, is because sobriety has given me so much. Given me back my sanity, given me back, just parts of life that were gone. And I have chosen to give the rest of my life helping others, and it is very rewarding when that comes back full circle like that. So thank you for that. And Keith, I really want to thank you for sharing your story with us, and telling everybody out there, about your journey. I knew it would be a good story, so I do appreciate that. And if there's anybody out there that is struggling with addiction, or perhaps watching a family member struggle with addiction, please reach out to me on, you can reach out to me through Messenger, through my website at Intervention Support Services. Love the opportunity to connect with you. Please like, share, follow these posts every Monday at 3:30. And, your best life is waiting for you. Connect with me, and we will find it together. I hope you all are enjoying the Christmas season. I think we'll have one more before Christmas, but I'm going to wish you an early Merry Christmas anyway. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.